Brian Flores, we were talking about it off air of what now has happened. We know that he has a lawsuit against the NFL and the racism he's claiming, saying that he's gotten fired from the Miami Dolphins because he was black and with all that had come with it. Now Tua comes out and says pretty much, after explaining the way he explained, it seems that he was the reason why Flores was fired, and more so because Flores degraded him so badly since the day they had worked together, and they worked together for 2 years, that he just couldn't function like that. And apparently he might have had a meeting with ownership or somebody in an executive position, and ultimately Brian Flores, in addition to his record being fairly mediocre, pretty much just over 500, I think, he got fired because of it. But no one knew about Tua's side of it, so they automatically started talking about the racial component as Brian Flores brought it up. And of course, in today's climate, everyone wants to bring up the race deal, especially the black coaches and black players who believe that there's a grievance they can really push to the forefront with it. And that's exactly what has happened. Now we hear the other half to the story. It might have been Tua. Well, it may be Tua now, that saying what he had said on the Dan Libertard show about how he was being treated by Flores, just degraded. And football coaches are known for degrading. We've heard Nick Saban on some videos just go off on players. But there's a way you handle certain players. It's not a one-size-fits-all proposition with players. Somebody who might be a little bit more sensitive. Yeah, football is not a sensitive sport, but maybe more sensitive coaching-wise than the next guy. Tua looks like with McDaniel as his coach now, he's gotten over it, and we've seen the type of player he's become. He's now one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL and was compensated in the offseason as if he's one of those guys. So there's something to be said about what Brian Flores has done, who's now, I think, a defensive coordinator for the Vikings, and what was the reasons why he had gotten fired.
Well, I didn't hear what Tua had to say. And I recall, like, I didn't believe Brian Flores should have gotten fired at the time. So you kind of want to believe Tua that there was something else going on, right? You don't want to believe, well, we didn't win the Super Bowl. He's a black coach. Let's get rid of him. But I believe they did have a good season when he got fired. They did win like 11 or 12 games that year, and it didn't seem like he deserved to get fired.
That would be the reason. That's why I think is that behind the scenes issue that might have happened, and it might have been percolating, and it got to a boiling point to where a decision had to be made. Even we look at what happened from the outside, we just see the record and the performance. We're like, why would they fire a guy like this? But then when you look at the toxic environment behind the scenes and the lack of growth from this quarterback, imagine if Brian Flores wasn't that bad a guy in that case, the way that he's been, described, and he stays there and Tua does grow into an even better quarterback. Now you're talking about a real serious contender year in and year out, because now it looks like Brian also knows how to coach and he's not an asshole on the side. But McDaniels is the one who's reaping the rewards of a quarterback who's content. You can still be hard on him the same way Belichick was hard on Tom Brady when he needed to be. They had their contentions on the sidelines. We've seen it before. But no one's.
That's what I was going. That was what I was going to say. With Flores out, Tua has risen to one of the top 5, 6 quarterbacks in the league, and as long as he's protected, he finds his guys open.
Yeah, he's always been accurate. I watched him in Alabama from the time he stepped in there.
Right. So that makes me believe that the Dolphins made the right move, because now they have the right guy. Tua can flourish, and I mean he's been phenomenal. He's putting up crazy numbers. He hasn't just played well, like
exceedingly
like they hung the 70 on the Broncos.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just the Broncos. They put 45 on this team, 40 on this team, 40 on that team. Right. So it was obviously a good move. You can't argue with it. Brian Flores can be in his feelings about it. He can be salty all he wants, but when you look at the whole picture, the team's doing better, the quarterback's doing better, and the quarterback is saying that the coach was a problem when he was there. So it looks like the Dolphins made the right move.
Yeah, I think they made the right move getting rid of him and letting Tua grow with someone else because they saw why they picked him as early as they did. They wanted him to be a franchise quarterback. They're paying him like a franchise quarterback. He's playing like a franchise quarterback. Hey, you just have a bunch of franchise quarterbacks doesn't mean you're going to the Super Bowl, but at least you have stability at the most important position on the football field, and he's that guy. And on the other hand, Brian Flores, he's with Minnesota right now as a defensive coordinator, but then you look at it a little deeper in things that had been said as well when he's still trying to make race the leading issue when he talked about John Elway. That's another issue that had come up when it came to the race card. He talked about John Elway pretty much, and this Rooney Rule has a lot to do with it because it almost forces you to tick the box, whether you're doing it legitimately or not. You have to tick the box of getting a minority coach an interview before you make your ultimate hire. Sometimes they're hoping that it ends up being that minority coach. But now Brian Flores saying what he had said about John Elway, how he was disheveled and drunk when he had interviewed him, and that he pretty much wasn't really taking him serious. He just kind of just ticked the Rooney Rule box and just to get him in and out, and then ended up hiring someone else. And I think what really added insult to injury was Bill Belichick sending him a text of congratulations because he thought he had the job and he did it. So I think that's what made it even worse.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't know if that actually happened. If it did, shame on John Elway. That's bogus. But when you force people to do something like the Rooney Rule does,
yep.
I mean, like, you know, like even if you and I were coaches for the same team and we had an opening, we're going to talk, hey, who do you like? Who do you like? We're going to have certain guys we're focused on. And like, well, let's not forget, we got to interview one of these guys over here.
And it's a bad look from the start. It starts off bad. If the guy that we're talking about isn't a guy of color or a minority, then we already start off on a bad foot. We've seen this guy in the top 10 in the NFL, this guy in the top 5 in the NFL, this guy, a top 2 guy in the NFL at the position we're looking to fill. And then there's the black dude who's probably looking for his first opportunity of doing anything significant. He should be left out of the fold to begin with, but you have to interview him or someone like him. And then you got to make an issue and let the interview run its course and make your decision based on what you want for your team, but still keeping in mind, man, if I don't take this guy or don't take him serious or give him the opportunity, you're going to have the side eye, whether it's legitimate or not. And it's just a bad situation overall. The intent was good, but then in practice and execution, that's horrible with the Rooney Rule.
Yeah, it is because then you have guys coming in interviewing, and it's not a real interview. They don't have an actual shot for the job. You know, my biggest thing is right now, like, why doesn't Eric Bieniemy have a head coaching job?
You know what? I think we already talked about, with Eric Bieniemy not having a job. We did that last season.
But you look at all these offensive coordinators that get jobs, first-time head coaching jobs, Matt Nagy, I like all these guys. Yep. You know, all the offensive gurus, they come from Andy Reid or Mike Holmgren or whoever's tree, and they get opportunities. Why isn't Bieniemy getting an opportunity?
But you know what? Like I said, we talked about that last season before the season started. And we also talked about the issues he has with individuals. And those issues have been talked about even before last year and even before the last 2 years. People were talking about his lack or inability to communicate with players in a way that's probably professional, saying certain things to players. Last year, we saw and heard how players were going to Ron Rivera talking about, hey, man, you need to call your boy. You need to talk to your boy, but he don't know how to talk to us because he's just a hardcore dude, and that's ill. I heard the same stories in Kansas City. Luckily, you have somebody like Mahomes there who can stomach that, or he doesn't have to put up with it. You know what I mean? And they'll fire him before they do anything with Mahomes. And you also saw Andy Reid can oversee anything that's been going on. And it seemed like he's been the problem all along. And then looking at his past, I remember his days at Colorado. They talked about his attitude problem back then. Maybe some chip on his shoulder he carried from his New Orleans days in high school or his neighborhood or whatever. It never went away. Maybe it's the Napoleonic syndrome. The dude's only 5'7". Maybe it could be that. He's got an issue, man. And it seems like it's a perpetual issue that has not been resolved. Now he's at UCLA. He's been given an opportunity to be an offensive coordinator now. And let's see what happens with that. I'm still thinking his best opportunity is in college. It may not be the pros because you have a lot more control in college, even though that's waning because of NIL and transfer portal. If they don't like you, they just move on. You know, he's probably going to get his best opportunity as a head coach, as a collegiate coach instead of an NFL coach.